Hey, I was actually going to pick up where I left off last week with the entire Orange Papers link that was talking about, what AA members did to the original atheist in the group, which someone had pointed out was actually a member named Jim Burwell. So Ed, that I said didn't exist, may have actually existed, but the story doesn't seem to have gone down the way Bill W. wrote it out to be. Jim was an atheist and a member of AA, and Bill W. did not like it. In fact, Bill W. made sure his story never got into the first edition of the big book. I think it got in there later. I never really read the stories in the back of the book. I looked at them at the time I was in AA. I think they were on their fourth edition or something like that, and they were all so fucking boring that I never could read them all. I used to see people in AA saying, oh, I knew I had moved up in sobriety when my sponsor said you can read the stories in the back of the book now, or whatever it is. But before I actually jumped into where I left off, I don't remember if I put up the link to the Orange Papers website in the last video or not. I'll put it up this week for certain, because the website used to go up and go online, go offline, then it would come up back online, and it wouldn't quite work with all the links and everything like that. The search engine didn't work. Right now, currently, it's online, and it has been for quite some time. I said that before, but it was a very valuable place, a very valuable website I went to back in the early 2000s when I was starting to wonder what was going on with all the bullshit that was happening to me in AA, and I kept thinking it was me that was the problem. I kept thinking I must be crazy. Everybody else in here is claiming that this thing works, and it's not working for me, and I know I'm the problem. That kind of thinking that I can't hardly believe I ever, had. But there was something that somebody said in a comment, not on my video, but on, and it wasn't necessarily on another channel, that's critical of AA. It was on one of those videos that was talking about it was a pro AA video. I can't remember where it was. Otherwise, I would maybe do a response to it. But the one comment I saw 2 or 3 times, it was one of those videos like, is AA a cult? And of course, the person claims it's not, but I couldn't find it. There's a billion like that out there on YouTube, sadly enough. But all these people were saying you're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem. And I used to hear that shit in AA all the time. You're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem. Like it was some real grand ultimatum that you were being handed to, that, what they're really saying is you're either falling in line with the cult religion, lock, stock, and barrel, and repeating and regurgitating all the cult dogma, or you're not. And therefore, if you're not, you're part of the problem. They're more or less equating the fact that if you're not a religious cult member of Quackaholics Anonymous, then you must somehow be pro-drinking yourself to death, or pro-everybody getting, drinking themselves to death, pro all this bad stuff happening. I've had people even say, well, at least it gives alcoholics a place to go. Well, yeah, it gives them a place to go where they can be at the mercy of predators and bullies and thieves and con artists and manipulators and gaslighters and every other kind of vile human behavior on the planet. I mean, technically Rawway Prison is a place to go. It doesn't mean I want to go there, for any treatment for my problems, to be honest with you. But as far as part of the solution, part of the problem, I could very easily turn that around. You're either on board with really trying to find the root causes of addiction, or the root causes of why people drink themselves to death, why I almost drank myself to death. You're either on board with really finding actual solutions to those problems, or you're on board with a crazy fucking cult religion that's living in another fantasy world where God gives you parking places and miracles on demand by removing your desire to drink because you went and did a fist step with some old-timer asshole that probably was laughing at you the whole entire time and talking about you behind your back. You're either part of the superstitious cult or you're part of the real world. How about that? But it's really funny. That's a false dichotomy they're shoving down your throat. They're more or less saying you're either part of the solution or part of the problem. Well, I don't see AA offering any solutions. I never saw AA in all my years of being in AA offering any solutions. I saw a bunch of people night after night after night that were constantly genuflecting to these old-timer assholes that were always talking about what wonderful people they were, or how spiritual they were, or what badasses they used to be back in the day. You get to know those people on a personal level outside of the rooms and outside of the performance art that they put on in those rooms, and you realize they're all full of shit. Meanwhile, the people who relapse, the people who really struggle with drinking, and the people who really have a hard time with their addictions are seriously killing them, they get left by the wayside. And when they get left by the wayside and they overdose and die or commit suicide, the old timers are all sitting there smugly grinning and saying, well, some have to die so that others can live. Not all of us get this simple program. Some of us are never entirely ready. Some of us are not entirely capable of being honest with ourselves. Maybe it doesn't have a fucking thing to do with being honest. Maybe it has to do with the fact that we're being given phony quack medicine as a cure, And one more thing, I've had a few people attack me with, well, what's your solution? What's your solution? I don't necessarily have to have an actual solution for millions of people just because I'm criticizing a cult religion that has no real solution at all. For instance, if you saw somebody selling some kind of phony relic by the side of the road saying this will ensure that you never get COVID, the flu, or a cold ever again, and you said, well, this is bullshit, okay? And I hate the fact that people are buying these things from you because you're selling them a lie. You're selling them a bunch of trinkets disguised as some kind of cure-all for something that doesn't work. And the person looked at you and said, well, what's your fucking solution? Oh, that's right. You can't cure colds. You can't cure the flu. You can't cure COVID. So what's your fucking solution? You're part of the problem, not the solution. Do you see the faulty logic there? Simply because someone is selling you a bunch of nonsense and packaging it up as some kind of solution to your addiction problems, and somebody else like myself comes along and says, you're preaching a phony cult religion that's not grounded in any form of reality whatsoever, and they say, well, what's your solution? Well, my solution is not to go to a phony cult religion, but maybe to look deep within inside of yourself after you put the bottle down and try to figure out what's going on. Anyway, now that I've cut all that out of the way, I just, that kind of irked me when I read that part of the solution, part of the problem kind of thing. I was going to jump, I'm going to skim a little here, but I'm going to pick up where the Orange Papers decides to go a little bit more about the We Agnostics chapter, the chapter I hate the most. Out of all the chapters, well, I hate the whole fucking thing. There's no point in me trying to sugarcoat that. But I used to sit in meetings and listen to this We Agnostics read. There was a Sunday morning meeting, believe it or not, at this AA clubhouse, and the guy running it was a total piece of shit. There's no way to sugarcoat that either. But he would always say, well, I think it's appropriate on Sunday morning that we talk out of We Agnostics. It's one of the most important chapters, for those of us who thought we were smart and intellectual. We must read from We Agnostics. It's a Sunday thing that we should honor and obey. Yeah, but it's not a religion. We're not in a fucking church. We're just being told that we got to hear a chapter on Sunday morning about how atheists and agnostics are bad people. But it's not a religion at all. But he writes, Bill Wilson continued chapter 4 of the big book, We Agnostics, with an outrageous world-class example of bad logic. Yeah, the whole fucking thing is pretty much bad logic. Wilson actually invoked the terrible evils of blind faith, dogmatic religious belief, and crazy superstition, he's writing this, as it existed in Europe during the Middle Ages as the reason why we should now have more faith, religious belief, and superstition. And now I got to read out of the book here, but bear with us. It's a lot of people don't want to hear any material out of the book after escaping the cult, but I actually think it's important to pull material from the book so people can hear it and then hear it attacked, because we used to have to sit in meetings silently listening to these people read this stuff like they had found the Holy Grail or something that had some mystical, magical solution to all the world's problems. And we had to hear him commit all these logical fallacies, and you had to sit there and be quiet because you didn't have enough sober time to get called on and listen to these great fake gurus tell us how wonderful this is. So let's start attacking it. This world of ours, Bill W. wrote, has made more material progress in the last century than in all the millenniums which went before. Almost everyone knows the reason. Students of ancient history tell us that the intellect of men in those days was equal to the best of today. Students of ancient history tell us that the intellect of men in those days was equal to the best of today. Not so sure I could 100% go along with that, because the greatest intellects of those days, at the time of the Middle Ages, because the Roman Empire had fallen, the Catholic Church pretty much stepped in and became the ruling authority that united all the kings and stuff in Europe at the time. Once the Roman Empire fell, Europe didn't have a central government authority, so the Catholic Church during the Middle Ages served kind of like the EU does today. And most of the learned men at the time believed in the Catholic Church. I mean, the Inquisition was going on during this time. So the Black Death was thought to be a sin. So I don't know if we could call the intellect the same. Excuse me. I'm not going to go into Hegel here about the philosopher Hegel about periods of time in history and what. Well, that's a long, complicated discussion that would be that belongs in a philosophical video. Doesn't belong in what we're doing here. I get sidetracked very easily, as I'm sure you've figured out if you've been watching me for a while. So anyway, yet in ancient times, material progress was painfully slow. The spirit of modern scientific inquiry, research, and invention was almost unknown. Actually, that's not true. The Enlightenment is when a lot of scientific inquiry was known. There was scientific inquiry even in the Middle Ages. It just wasn't. It wasn't as modern as our own was. There hadn't been the invention of certain things, technologically speaking, that enabled people to be able to do certain things that we were able to do in later times. The invention of the microscope changed science considerably. The inventions of the telescopes, etc., etc., etc. But again, I'm getting sidetracked here. Ancient Greece, ancient Rome's a different ball game altogether again. You know, after the fall of Roman Empire, education took a major nosedive. Anyway, this is not a history lesson. In the realm of the material, men's minds were fettered by superstition, tradition, and all sorts of fixed ideas. Some of the contemporaries of Columbus thought a round earth preposterous. Others came near putting Galileo to death for his astronomical heresies. We ask ourselves this. What Bill W. says is you, not him. He never asked himself shit. Okay. Are not some of us just as biased and unreasonable about the realm of the spirit as were the ancients about the realm of the material? Well, first of all, the scientific minds of the Middle Ages and the scientific minds of ancient Rome and the scientific minds during the Enlightenment were not biased and unreasonable. A lot of them were working off of a framework of what they already had. So Bill Wilson doesn't know what he's talking about here, but the realm of the spirit? What proof do you have of a realm of the spirit? But Orange Papers answers this quite saliently, I think. He says the simple answer to Bill Wilson's question is no. We're not biased and unreasonable. We just don't like crazy, double-talking religious whack jobs, nuts, or their irrational cult dogma. Yeah. Another good answer is the realm of the spirit, which was actually, a lot of the ruling party, the ruling body of the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages was all about the realm of the spirit, Bill. So I don't know what the fuck you're talking about there. The realm of the spirit was blind faith, superstition, church orthodoxy, religious bigotry, heresy trials, witch burnings, millions of women and children being burned alive for being witches, the Grand Inquisition mass murder, millions executed, heretics being killed, people being tortured to death during the church's Inquisition, people being put to death for scientific inquiry, and people not conforming to what the Holy Scripture was purported to say. If you differed in dogma, look up some of the religious sects that were called heretics in the Middle Ages. So Orange Papers adds, we were already been there and done that. We gave one really good try for a few thousand years, and we don't need to go down the route of that kind of superstitious nonsense again. Notice how Bill, Orange Papers writes, pulls another bait-and-switch stunt with his paragraphs. First, he seems to claim that he's scientific, logical, and reasonable. And then, just as when he gets you agreeing with him about, yeah, we've seen a lot of scientific progress, we've seen, things going on that have generally enabled the lives of modern people to be a lot better with running water, with the first inklings of electricity, with the possibility of even inventing something as simple as screens in the 1920s to keep the flies out. Yeah, I'm agreeing with you here. But then he does a bait and switch and tells you to embrace blind faith and superstition. He starts out with a statement that's unquestionably true for Western civilization. The world of ours has made more material progress, etc. Then he talks about the evils of superstition, tradition, and all sorts of fixed ideas and heresy trials. Then, just as you totally agreed with him, he suddenly reverses the logic, changes gears, and tries to sell you a superstition about the realm of the spirit. All of the talk about modern scientific inquiry, research, and invention was just bait. It was just bait to get you to kind of say, well, this guy's making a little bit of sense here. This guy's making a little bit of sense. It's just a bait, and it gets you with your logical mind to follow along with it, and it's just a trick that gets you to accept his stupid statements. And then, Orange Papers writes, beginning with the very next line in that chapter, he tries to do it all again. First offering a bait, first offering a little bit of science and technology, and then pulling the switch, asking you to accept his religious beliefs. He writes, Bill W., even in the present century, American newspapers were afraid to print an account of the Wright brothers' first successful flight at Kitty Hawk. Had not all efforts at flight failed before? I don't know if that's true or not. I'd have to look up the historical documents about that. Did not Professor Langley's flying machine go to the bottom of the Potomac River? Was it not true that the best mathematical minds had proved that man could never fly? Actually, Da Vinci wrote, he had actual sketches, was the word I was looking for, of flying machines all the way back in the Italian Renaissance. Had not people said God had reserved this privilege to the birds? Well, I don't know of anybody who said that. I know of people who said, I'm going to fly, and when they said, I'm going to fly, everybody said, yeah, right. Let me see you do it, and I'll believe it. Nobody said, no, just God only wants the birds to fly. This is more bullshit coming out of Wilson's mouth. Only 30 years later, the conquest of the air was almost an old story, and airplane travel was in full swing. But in most fields of our generation has witnessed a complete liberation in thinking. Show any longshoreman a Sunday supplement describing a proposal to explore the moon by means of a rocket, and he will say, I bet they do it. Maybe not so long either. And this is the part in the meetings where everybody says, just think of how far ahead of his time Bill W. was. He predicted it. He's just the smartest man ever. Is not our age characterized by the ease with which we discard old ideas for the new, by complete readiness with which we throw away the theory or gadget which does not work for something new which does? We had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems this same readiness to change our point of view. And readiness to change your point of view really means readiness to accept Bill W.'s cult fucking religion. So you got to dump all your ideas in the trash can. Just believe Bill W.'s ideas, because scientific people right now in the 1930s or whatever, they're more accepting of modern inventions. They're less likely to be inclined to superstition like they were in the Middle Ages. They're starting to see that maybe, yeah, there is possibilities, limitless possibilities to boldly go where no man has gone before. And now Bill W. is saying, so if they can do that, you need to become a cult member and be religious. After all, scientific people think we'll fly into outer space one day. How come you can't accept God? How come you can't accept God? That's how fucking idiotic this whole entire fucking chapter is. He's literally saying, because scientists, humans, by the way, the Wright brothers didn't fly a fucking plane because they got on their knees and did a fucking four-step with their sponsor. They flew a plane because of human inquiry, human imagination was able to conceive of it. Human ingenuity was able to conceive of the fucking plane. It wasn't some power greater than themselves. Bill W. would have you believe that because the modern age, as he called it back then, is becoming more accepting of the fact that there are limitless possibilities in modern technology, that you have to become a cult member of Alcoholics Anonymous if you got a drinking problem. This chapter makes no fucking sense at all. Speaking of bad logic, Orange Papers writes, Wilson then wrote, logic is great stuff. We liked it. We still like it. No, you didn't like logic, Bill. You hated logic. You hated everybody who applied logic to your stupid fucking cult religion, and you condemned them all to alcoholic death if they didn't follow your fucking cult religion. Anyway, is it not by chance, Bill W. wrote, we were given the power to reason, to examine the evidence of our senses, and to draw conclusions? Yeah, that's what human beings do. That's what they've done since the time periods when they built the fucking pyramids and constructed Stonehenge, unless you believe aliens did it. Well, what's the guy on the History Channel with the funny hair, That is one of man's magnificent attributes. We, agnostically inclined, would not feel satisfied with a proposal which does not lend itself to reasonable approach and interpretation. Key word is reasonable approach and interpretation. Reasonable approach and interpretation. Not following a stupid fucking cult religion when you got a drinking problem. Not praying away your drink problem. Hence, Bill W. writes, we are at pains to tell why we think our present faith is reasonable. Why we think it more sane and logical to believe. Why we say our former thinking was soft and mushy when we threw up our hands in doubt and said we don't know. Orange Papers writes, Bill W. was misusing the word logic. There's nothing logical about blind faith in a cult religion. Logic is a thought process where one examines facts and draws conclusions from them using inductive or deductive reasoning. Bill was also using his bait and switch trick again. He starts the paragraph by praising logic, saying he likes it. Then he switches sides and attacks it and praises blind faith in his beliefs as being more logical than logic itself. He's just writing a lot of gobbledygook and telling you got to convert to his cult religion because you're desperate here. And isn't it funny how Bill W., Orange writes, admitted that he was at pains to tell why we think our present faith is reasonable, why we think it's more sane and logical to believe. The reason that it's so hard to defend that point of view is because it's completely irrational and it's completely illogical. It's based on no facts at all. It's just wishful thinking. Then Mr. W., Bill W., declares that blind faith is the goal and reason is a serious impediment. Some of us had already walked far over the bridge of reason toward the desired shore of faith. The bridge of reason to the desired shore of faith. I think Bill W. is confusing hope and faith. You got a serious drinking problem. You have a bunch of people telling you that they can cure your drinking problem. You sort of say, well, you know what? I'm desperate. I don't know what to do. Everything I've done has failed. I keep fucking boozing even though I don't want to. Maybe I'll give this a shot and see if it works. That's all he's talking about. Doesn't prove that the cult is right. The outlines and the promise of the new land has brought us to tired eyes and fresh courage to flagging spirits, Bill W. writes. Now it brings a bunch of desperate people hoping for a solution to their drinking problems that in turn gets fucked over and told, no, you got to give the rest of your life and your soul to the cult and do whatever we command and dictate to you to do. Don't feel normal human emotions because you got a drinking problem. That's a dubious luxury for other people, you know. Don't stand up for yourself. Don't use your own brain. Don't use your own willpower. Don't use your own determination. Don't use logic and reasoning. Just do what we tell you to do for the rest of your entire natural life. But somehow we couldn't quite step ashore the new land. Perhaps we had been leaning too heavily on reason on the last mile and did not like to lose our support. In other words, he's telling you that you're desperate, you want a solution to your drinking problem, but you know what your fucking problem is? You just keep leaning on that reason. That reason is just terrible shit. You got to give up that reason to drive the ships to new land, fight the hordes, sing and cry, quoting Led Zeppelin. That whole paragraph is an incredible piece of propaganda, Orange writes, and it's a real fairy tale. It's also obviously as delusional as it can be. The object of Alcoholics Anonymous program was supposed to be about quitting drinking. Remember, you got the AA and they said, if you want to quit drinking, we can help. But now Bill W. insists that the goal of the AA program is to abandon reason and embrace blind faith in his teachings to reach the desired shore of faith in the promised new land. This pathetic lunatic actually has the arrogance, the sheer gall to demand that we give up reason and human intelligence and become insane, completely irrational, religious maniacs, just like him, Orange writes. What is it they're fond to say in a lot of the meetings? When common sense becomes uncommon sense. When common sense becomes uncommon sense. Okay, what does uncommon sense look like? Does that mean that if I'm in a room full of people and they're all sneezing and coughing, that I should get right up in their faces and let them spit right in my eye? Because that's uncommon sense. Common sense would tell me to try to kind of avoid the situation. Does uncommon sense mean that, if there's a serious storm outside and it's lightning one time right after the other, I should walk right out into the field, right? Right out where the lightning's happening all the time, because that's uncommon sense. This is just a lot of blabber, Anyway, Orange goes on to write, Mr. Wilson claims that we have walked over a bridge of reason towards a desired shore of faith. How do you do that? What if we've done no such thing? What if we have no desire to reach the shore of Bill W.'s new land of blind faith? The flowery image like the outlines and the promise of the new land has brought us to tired eyes and fresh courage to flagging spirits. Friendly hands stretched out in welcome are totally fucking ridiculous. He didn't write fucking. I threw that in there. Bill Wilson was really living in a fantasy world, but finally at the last minute, reason, he writes, stops us from wholeheartedly embracing his world of grandiose delusions. I should think so, and I hope it does. It shows that the rest of us still have a few functioning brain cells left, and that booze hasn't killed it all, and at least have some small amount of sanity in contact with reality, which is why we stubbornly refuse to get his simple program. While Bill W. is advising us to discard reason, we should consider the words of the American Revolutionary War hero Ethan Allen, the leader of the Green Mountain Boys, and their capture. Those who invalidate reason ought seriously to consider whether they argue against reason with or without reason. If with reason, then they establish the principle that they are laboring to dethrone, but if they argue without reason, which in order to be consistent with themselves they must do, they are out of reach of rational conviction, nor do they deserve a rational argument. Christopher Hitchens put that a little bit easier. That which extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that which is asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. But Armitage writes, Bill wasn't nearly finished with his attack on reason and sanity. He continued, perhaps we had been leaning too heavily on reason the last mile and did not like to lose our support. That was natural. But let us think a little more closely. Without knowing it, had we not been brought to where we stood by a certain kind of faith? I didn't get brought to where I stood by a certain kind of faith. I got brought to where I stood because I enjoyed drinking. I enjoyed it so much that it started causing me problems. And after it started causing me problems, I didn't have really any other way to look at the world other than to drink to cope with it. That's how I was brought to where I stood. It wasn't by any faith. I don't need faith to know that a bottle of booze is going to make me feel euphoric for a few minutes before it starts making me crazy and before it gives me a violent, ugly hangover in the morning. I don't need faith for that. I know that's going to happen if I drink. So no, I wasn't brought to AA by a certain kind of faith. For did we not believe in our own reasoning? Well, I mean, everybody has to believe in their own reasoning. You know, when you wake up in the morning and it's Monday morning and you have to go to work because you have bills piling up and because you have obligations and responsibilities, are you going to say to yourself, well, I don't believe I do. I don't believe that what I'm telling myself is true at all. Everything I'm telling myself is a lie. So I'm just not going to go to work because I'm delusional. I mean, it's not believing in your own reasoning. Your reasoning happens anyway. When you're a 3-year-old kid, okay, and you want that extra piece of birthday cake and you sneak into the kitchen when your parents aren't around and you try to get that extra bit of birthday cake, that's a 3-year-old reasoning. You're born with reasoning. You know, reasoning is a part of you, your entire existence. You know, when you're going to school and you're trying to figure out how to ace a test that you studied for and you still don't feel confident in passing it, that's reason. Did you have to think about that? Or did that just come naturally to you? This is so fucking stupid. Did we not have the confidence in our ability to think? I don't have to have confidence in my ability to think. Okay? If I get a headache, I don't have to say, I'm confident in my ability to figure out that I got to go take an aspirin. I don't have to, when I get a bill in the mail, say, you know what, I'm so confident in my ability to think, I'm going to pay the bill. This is actually telling you that you have a choice over the way you think, the way you thought process, the way that if you see a storm cloud coming up, that if you decide, well, you know, maybe I should seek shelter before the lightning strikes, that you're confident in your ability to think. You're not doing any of that. You're acting on fucking instincts. This is ridiculous. What was that but a sort of faith? No, faith is believing in something that you can't possibly know. No, actually. In fact, I liked what one guy said. I can't remember his name, but he gave a lecture on YouTube about that one time, and he said, I don't call it faith. I call it pretending to know things that you could not possibly know. And he said, when people tell me I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, think about that. I don't pretend to not know. I don't pretend to know things that I could not possibly know enough to pretend that I know things that I can't possibly know. Yes, we had been faithful, abjectly faithful to the God of reason. No, we have not. So in one way or another, we discovered that faith had been involved all the time. This is a desperate, pleading desire to make you believe that you're religious when you're not. We found that, too, we had been worshipers in one form or another. We'd been living by faith and little else. That is so not true. That's just so fucking idiotic. But the Armitage Papers rebuts with, now Bill seems to have logically proven to us that he's totally insane. He accuses us of having faith in a false God, the God of reason, and of worshiping it. He thinks that because we trust our senses and our ability to think logically, that we should now feel free to abandon our intelligence. Whoa, I messed that completely up. That we must now feel free to abandon our intelligence, our reason, our logic, our sanity, and just believe in the religious proclamations of Bill W. You know what? You're a reasoning individual, are you not? You've reasoned about things your whole life, haven't you? You've tried to figure out things your whole life, haven't you? You fucking filthy heretic. You worshipped your reason. Now you gotta believe in my God or die a drunken death. This makes no fucking sense whatsoever. And yet I used to sit in meetings believing this crap. I need to start kind of finishing it off here for this one because I'm almost at 30 minutes. What Bill frivolously overlooks is the logical conclusion of his line of reasoning. Because we simply trust our minds and our perceptions, we can't know anything for sure. We're in fact flying on faith. We can only assume that our perception of reality is correct. But our perceptions really might be all wrong. We might not really be here at all. This might all just be a dream. We dreamed one long afternoon a long time ago. What was the Chinese, I can't say his name right now. What if I was a butterfly who dreamed I was a man, or if I was a man who dreamed he was a butterfly kind of situation. So nothing's real. There's nothing to get uptight about. Strawberry fields forever, Orange writes. Nothing matters and we can do whatever we want because it's all just a dream. So let's just dump this boring fool, Bill Wilson, and go have a beer together. The beer won't be real either, so it won't hurt anything, but illusions will taste good, won't it? The reality of the situation is alcohol is real, hangovers are real, everything else might be an illusion, but the pain of drinking is very real. Bill continues in his sermons, imagine a life without faith. We're nothing left but pure reason. It wouldn't be life. That's totally crap. For one thing, you're acting like everybody has to either have religious faith or be in pure reason. You know, like if you're waiting on a loved one to come visit you and they're on a plane and you hear that there's a bad storm where they're flying, and you say to yourself, I really hope they get here all right. I really hope that plane lands in one piece. You have no way of knowing that it will, but you're totally believing that it will. You're hoping that it will. Okay, you're not necessarily believing in blind reason. You're not believing in religion. You're not believing in anything. You're just saying, I really am confident and hopeful that that will happen and they'll pull through. So Bill W. is full of shit again. This idea that you either have to be of religious faith, his religious faith, or live on pure reason. Nobody lives on pure reason alone. People are emotional creatures. Emotional creatures act and feel based on their emotions as much as their reasoning powers. You're going to tell me that that you don't have any decisions that you make in this world based on pure emotion alone? You're going to tell me that you've never done something simply because you feel like doing it? You know, have you ever sat and fucked around on social media on your day off and said, you know, this is stupid, I'm wasting my time here, but I fucking feel like doing it? I mean, if I'm not doing that, then I'm living on faith. I need to live on pure reason alone. But if I live on pure reason alone, I can't join Bill W.'s cult religion. This whole line of thinking is shoddy. This is an entirely twisted, delusional way of looking at life in general. And he's twisting and distorting the words faith and twisting and distorting the words reason in an attempt to confuse you and get you to bow over to his fucking cult religion. I mean, I can't believe I ever took any of this stuff seriously. I'm feeling kind of like I need an aspirin myself after going through all that gobbledygook. Anyway, I'm gonna read a subscriber comment that I thought was a good one to round it all off with. I think most of the old timers aren't even sober. I actually happen to agree with that. Too many of them seem to have the red nose, dilated veins, and the flushed face indicative of current alcohol use. You know, I've noticed that myself. I mean, the color in your face, your complexion, your whole, I don't know how to explain it, but when I was on a 3-month bender, I looked like a guy on a 3-month bender. I didn't look, all that healthy. And I used to see people in AA claiming 30 years of sobriety that looked like they were on a fucking bender. I remember being in the checkout lane at Circle K, and this guy who I had heard speak at quite a few meetings was in line with a 24-pack of beer. That doesn't surprise me at all. He was slurping down the beers while in line, being unable to wait until he completed the purchase. His minivan was outside, and he drove off drunk. He was actually a good speaker and also quite funny. I'm sure he was. Probably had a few before he spoke. Probably used to go home and sit there with his can of beer open and say, these stupid fucking newcomers, they just don't get this thing. These newcomers just don't get it. I wish they would sit down with me and I could talk to them. I could help them. Let me get another beer here. That's probably what he was doing. I personally knew of some that were popping pain beds, buying pills off the streets, smoking pot. And here's the thing. These are the same. I don't give a shit what you do in your personal life. I'm not the moral fucking police or anything like that. But these are the same people that would tell me, you're just not ever going to get sober, are you? And I'm thinking, you're going home to smoke pot and pop pills, but you're going to talk to me like I'm dirt because I drank liquor, But But I'm supposed to believe those people who were doing all that, popping the pills, smoking pot, and all that other stuff, I'm supposed to believe that they're never going to touch a drop of alcohol because they don't want to jeopardize their sobriety. Because there's one thing I do know about drugs, and primarily I was a drunk. Primarily 99.999. It was all alcohol with me. But there is one thing I do know about drugs. You're not going to be able to get your hands on them every day. I mean, you're not going to be able to find your drug every single day. Unless you're, a celebrity like Keith Richards, who had people that made whole careers off of selling them drugs. Maybe then you can find your drugs every day, even though he doesn't do that any longer. But you're not going to find them every day. So I'm supposed to believe that you who pop pain pills and pop street pills and smoke pot all the time, you're going to wake up one morning, you're not going to have your morning fix. And I'm supposed to believe you're not going to drive down to the gas station and buy a quart of beer or buy a half pint of vodka or whatever it is you do. You're not going to do that because you don't want to jeopardize your sober time. I mean, give me a break. AA people admit to being liars in meetings. When an alcoholic's lying, his lips are moving. You admit to me that you're a fucking liar, but I'm supposed to believe you're telling me the 100% absolute truth when you say that you're not drinking any alcohol and hadn't had any alcohol in decades. Yeah, I don't think so. Anyway, that's, oh my God, that's almost 35 fucking minutes of me talking. I doubt anybody's going to sit through this whole entire video. It's okay, you can skim. I wouldn't sit through 35 minutes of myself either. See you guys next week.